Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos podcast, the show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a prepared individual and a survivalist in today's day and age. I'm your host, Chris Bardagon, ZP002. On the show with me today is Jamie Franks and Paul Taylor, ZERT instructors extraordinaires, and we are doing a different format. First time on the show, we've had three people, so I'm excited about that. I take that back. It's not the first time we've had three people on the show, but it's the first time in the video format we've had three people on the show. So check it out. New things here happening at the ZERT HQ in the podcast. But Jamie, Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Usually you pay double for this kind of action.
I know, right? Jesus. I mean, the last time
you
we
guys got enough room for one more guy.
For one more, we do. Yeah, I think we can probably do that. We got to get somebody on here. Maybe one of these times we'll get XP001 on here just for comic relief, just for the good old times. But
what are you saying? We don't provide comic relief?
I mean, you probably will by the end of the show. I'm not going to lie. So today's show has been spawned from obviously the recent information coming out about this proposed bill in Massachusetts. I did a quick little teaser about it after getting a bunch of messages from state POCs, just regular ZERT members, friends of mine, and I mean, just a couple other people pertaining to this proposed bill regarding training and the regulation or the proposed regulation of training coming out of Massachusetts. So we did a little, teaser video, and when we had talked about what show we were going to do, I felt like this kind of took precedence over everything else that is on the calendar because it is kind of a hot button. So I know I sent it over to both of you to take a look at, and I've looked at it and tried to understand it to the best of my ability with the wording that these government officials use when writing these things. It is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, yeah. So it's actually as what, like, I don't want to seem like I'm correcting you just for the sake of correcting you, but you said it was a bill in Massachusetts. It's actually a bill that's being proposed in the Senate of the United States. So it's not just for Massachusetts; it's for everybody. But it is coming from a senator from Massachusetts who has been serving. He's been a sitting congressman or senator continuously since 1977, so 46 years, and I've never heard of the guy before this, so that shows how influential he's been. But yeah, the bill is it seeks to amend Title 18 of U.S. Code, which U.S. Code is the code that basically decides what is and isn't a crime. It's the basically the penal code section of U.S. law. And so it seeks to amend Title 18 basically by using this to create a new something that will now be considered as a crime. And it's to prohibit unauthorized private paramilitary activity and for other purposes. But, we talk about also in the news lately has been all this stuff about like the border bill and all this stuff. But like, the bills like that are 220 pages long, and they're convoluted, and they include a whole bunch of other stuff. In terms of that, this really is fairly short. It's really only a couple of pages.
I think it's actually only one page from what I've seen.
Yeah. I guess it depends on what format you're looking at it. But it's the thing that stood out to me is it's deliberately vague. Which I think is deliberately opening it up to a lot of interpretation, which I'm sure we'll get into. But
so yeah, and so a couple of the terms that are used in describing this bill and it are the words militia and paramilitary, and obviously militia hits close to home within ZERT because it has been commonly misrepresented as a militia. Paul, I'm, being around for as long as you have, especially in the Las Vegas area. I mean, there was there was a time where one of the 3-letter agencies walked into HQ and basically said, hey, we're aware of who you are. We know what you guys are doing. We understand that you have active and retired military and law enforcement. And so we understand that, you are what you are and you aren't what you aren't. And so, it's commonly referred to as a militia, but where that gets a little bit confusing is how the word militia is used, how it originated, and where it is now. Right. So I think there's a lot of misconception about that word.
Yeah, it's crazy the amount of ZERT members from the past and the present, and the amount of students that I have right now that are calling me or texting me, and they're so worried about this bill. So,
Right.
and I can completely understand. I have a different look at it, and I'm pretty sure it's the same look that everybody else, has. I can't say I'm not worried about it, but I just tell them, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not. I've never trained militias. I don't train militias. I'm training law-abiding citizens to protect themselves and their families. But if somebody showed up to my range and started asking questions, I'm pretty sure that, if this thing passed, of course, there's going to be and that's what we're having right now. This is leading up to more conversations.
Right.
So to say I'm not exactly worried about it, of course we're worried about this stuff because this is infringing our rights, which is crazy because it's also in this bill talking about infringing rights.
So just to kind of lay out the two definitions that I think are going to be important here is obviously a militia. The definition of a militia is a military force that is raised from a civilian population to supplement a regular army in an emergency. And then with all words, there's always, other definitions as well. And the second definition is a military force that engages in rebel or terrorist activities in opposition to a regular army. So those are the two definitions of the word as it sits.
Yeah. So do you know what you call 40? Do you know what you call 40 lesbians with guns?
What?
Militia, Etheridge.
Oh, Jesus.
Anyway, so in this bill, see, and you said there was no comedy relief,
right? But hold on, before we get to the bill, I just want to also define for everybody listening the Second Amendment. And if you're not aware of the Second Amendment, which I'm hoping everybody is, here it is: a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. So the word is literally in the Second Amendment, right? So those two definitions I wanted to get out there just so everyone understands what we're talking about. So go ahead, Jamie.
Oh, another important definition within the definition of the Second Amendment, not militia, Etheridge. No. So it says, it starts out with a well-regulated militia, and this is a little bit of a what do you call it? Like we don't speak this way anymore. Like Shakespeare used words that we don't use anymore. So when the Second Amendment was written, we think of the word regulation or regulated now as like limited, like we're going to regulate your right to bear arms or whatever. That means we're going to restrict it or we're going to make rules about it. When the Second Amendment was written, the definition of the word regulator or well-regulated or regulation was training. So it's funny that, this bill that we're going to get into, one of the things that it, kind of not so sneakily aims to restrict or regulate is training, which, like reservists now, like military reservists, they have like what they call a drill weekend or they're drilling. That's what was meant by the word regulated in the text of the Second Amendment. So I wanted to point that out as well. Regulation didn't mean regulated in the way we think of it now.
Right. And then if you're familiar with the movie Young Guns, there was regulators mount up.
And it
became a famous Nate Dogg song. But anyway, the history of militia, it dates back to the colonial era. Militias were used in the American Revolutionary War, American War of Independence. They were used back in the early days, the days that Paul was still a young guy. There we
Paul
go. We had to
Revere,
throw in
which
Paul.
Paul
Yes,
are you
Paul.
talking about here?
Exactly. Paul.
Okay.
Yes. But so during, and again, I have notes, so I will be referring to some of those notes here because I am not a complete historian. But during the colonial era, Anglo-American usage, military service was distinguished from militia service, and that distinguishing factor was obviously time and salary, where a militia was only kind of used or needed to meet a threat for a short period of time. The history of the military in our country is robust and probably unique. So militias were used during this time. 1787, the Constitutional Convention, Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution gave basically control to the federal Congress to use militias as deemed necessary. And then when you move into the 19th century, states maintained militia differently. Some saw action, some were not prepared. Again, they were able-bodied men who didn't get the kind of training that was probably needed, but some saw action during the War of 1812, the American Civil War, but they weren't really, it wasn't a negative thing that it eventually became.
No, it was celebrated. So each township, each community, each region had a regional militia. The term Minuteman was born out of in certain areas as we drew closer to the Revolution. Some areas realized they needed more of a QRF, a quick reaction force, that drilled more often and that were more well prepared, and they were kind of the elite divisions within the militia, and they needed to be ready at a minute's notice, and therefore they became known as the Minutemen. But the other, like the regular components of these early militias, they would drill only like a couple of times a year. They would really drill, like from what I read, like really 3 to 4 times per year, and that was kind of used as an excuse to have like a town festival.
Right.
While the militiamen were drilling or doing regulation, they would have like a festival around that, and all the townspeople would come out and watch and observe, and they would have like kind of a street fair based around the drilling of the militia. So yeah, it was a happy thing and very normal.
Yeah. Hollywood, we refer to movies a lot. I think we're all a bunch of movie guys here. Mel Gibson, The Patriot. I mean, that was a militia that was used during that time. And again, it was used to, obviously there was, there was some Hollywood effects in that movie, and there was some Hollywood isms in that movie, but it was like you just said, it was celebrated at that time, and it was not a negative, it didn't have a negative connotation to the word. And it wasn't until after the American Civil War that it started to kind of go sideways and started a spiral. And it was definitely, it started to get used. And what's funny is, again, we can always be fact checked here. And if somebody is a historian and they come in and like, no, but
absolutely,
but militias were used after the American Civil War to help secure wins in the South during 1876 by the Democratic Party. And it's funny to read that. it's like, I mean, what is this guy thinking? But
one of my favorite memes is it's a picture of Abraham Lincoln, and it says, "I haven't seen Democrats this mad since I took away their slaves."
Oh, Jesus. But so the initial thought behind militia was almost like a draft, right? It was all able-bodied men called on by the government to assist. When it started to become people creating their own groups and forming their own groups for their own agenda or to be used as their own agenda is when it started to, again, go kind of sideways. These groups formed themselves. They used force and intimidation and violence to push out Republican office holders during this time, which again is like, oh wow, shocker there. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to say that I am a full-on historian and I've read all the books. I mean, that would highlight some of this stuff, but I'm sure that is probably true. Now you can sit there and
there's many parallels that you can draw, like in the French Revolution, the group of people that was going around and snatching people out of their homes and cutting their heads off with the guillotine. They were called, and you can look this up, they were called the Committee for Public Safety. So, wow. We do all this stuff today, all this, ridiculousness and in the name of public safety. And, it's history certainly does repeat itself. But going back to the militia, in this bill that we're going to talk about, that some people are worried about, there is a section in the bill that outlines who is exempt. And they do outline that, like, authorized militias. And so then that begs the question of, well, okay, what's authorized? And so Section 32 of U.S. Code, subsection 109 is its title. It's U.S. Code. It's maintenance of other troops. And so it basically says that the chief executive or the governor of each state may designate an actual state militia that is appointed by him or her, and then additionally the National Guard counts as that as well. And then it's actually funny, you were reading that historical definition, and the actual definition that's actually still currently in U.S. Code mirrors very closely what you said. Like, you're not entitled to any sort of pay, you're not exempt from being drafted into actual military service. But when I was reading that bill and it said that authorized militias were exempt, well, then I was like, okay, well, what counts as an authorized militia? And so that's actually is codified by U.S. Code section 32. If you're interested in looking that up.
One of the other things that I recognized that militia had to provide their own firearms. So going back to the days of that, like, and again, we're not talking AR-15s. We're not talking about Glock pistols. Like, this is black powder, flintlock, like, and that's what they had to bring it. They were not, I think there was something where they would get reimbursed if there was damage or whatnot. But so you just brought up National Guard. So obviously anybody that's not listening, Jamie, you're still active duty. Paul, you are retired, but you did do the Guard, right, Paul?
Yeah, I was in the reserves for a year between my before I joined the Army.
Okay. So during the 20th century, I believe is when the National Guard was formed, or right around there. Again,
the Army National Guard claims that its birthday was in 1636. So it's, like, I always kind of tongue in cheek, no offense to anybody, I always kind of tongue in cheek make fun of the National Guard every year when they claim that they're 300 years old, and like the United States isn't even 300 years old. So how is the Army National Guard 300 years old? But they do claim that their birth date was in 1636.
Okay. All right.
So,
but during the 20th century is also when the rise of these private militias came, and the ones that they reference are all, and I don't want to name them, but they're all, they were all formed for religious, political extreme, or hate groups, right? And you can all kind of decipher who we're talking about at that point. And which leads us to a couple of years ago. And here's what's really funny is, like I said, we've talked about this is coming out of a Democrat out of Massachusetts. And, you know, the Democrats, the left will call BLM peaceful protesters, right? I mean,
Yeah, mostly peaceful.
mostly peaceful. Yeah. Like the shop owner, they got his head caved in and it was all caught on video. I'm sure that was peaceful. But
and the Bank of America that was burned to the ground about 3 miles from where I'm sitting, that was mostly peaceful.
Peaceful.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's kind of the history of the words that are being used in what we're about to talk about here. And I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to give some line of sight to that so everybody understands kind of where we're going. So Paul, you said you have the bill pulled up, or the proposed bill. I want to make sure. And then I think it is S.3589, right? So that is the number on the bill. And you can, and guys, if you're looking for this, we'll put the link down below. So you can go pull it up and read it or attempt to read it for yourself.
Yeah, I did want to put that out. Go ahead. I was going to say, if you wanted to Google it, you just Google Congress S.3589. Sorry. And
yep, that's it.
Sorry, my bad.
Yeah. So the link will be downstairs or down below. And apparently we're going to have to do a raise your hand thing here can't all talk at once, guys.
Yeah. Sorry. That's my bad. Sorry.
That's all right. All right, Paul. So when I talked to you about this the other day, obviously one of the ZERT members, new ZERT member who's been pretty active in taking your classes, you said he reached out to you. What was his initial concern or his initial thought on it? And I want to get, and I think Jamie, when I sent it to you, you weren't tracking on it. So I'd like to get both your initial thoughts. Paul, you have it from a member. So what was his initial thought?
Yeah, he was scared to death because he's taken quite a bit of training. I think he's taken 5 classes from me so far, and which is awesome because I remember talking to Jamie, a year ago, and he talked about the people that come out to his range and his company, and they keep taking the same class over and over again. Right. And
yeah,
at the time I was like, I take a class. Okay, I learned from them. I want to take a class from somebody else. But based on people's ability and knowledge, I'm seeing that these students aren't retaining everything, and that gives him a reason to come back. So he was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. And he showed me the bill, and I honestly read it, and I was like, yeah, this does not pertain to me. I don't even care. But then I looked at the big picture.
So was he was scared that he was going to get in trouble?
He was scared that they were going to start flying drones over my range and start, taking pictures of everybody's license plates and tracking us down. And he was afraid that he was going to get put on a list and they were going to take his guns. And I don't even know what he was, what all, but I mean, it gives people, there's so many people paranoid out there about, oh, I can't fly with a gun, or I can't do, and there's disinformation out there. Yeah. I basically was like, dude, I train law-abiding citizens to protect themselves and their families.
Right. So let's go into the bill here. And it's being cited as, or the short title is Preventing Private Paramilitary Activity Act of 2024. So
Jamie raised his hand. That was awesome. You got to pay attention.
Please. Sorry, I was reading the bill. Go ahead, Jamie. You're allowed to talk.
No, we do need some kind of signal, but no. So you talked about, what's the historical definition of a militia. We, and we talked about actually how like most of that definition that you read that dates back like literally 200 years, like actually does still apply. And I talked about how they did carve out an exemption clause within this bill. So then I said, authorized militias are exempt. So that begs the question, what's an authorized militia? So then what are we talking about? So they define what they seek to turn into a crime, because they seek to amend the, Title 18, which is the U.S. basically penal code, to include this. So what do they want to outlaw? and it's any organization or group of 3 or more persons associating under a command structure for the purpose of functioning in public or training to function in public as a combat support, law enforcement, or security services unit. So at the top of the show, I talked about how the first thing that jumped out at me when I read this entire thing top to bottom. They are deliberately being vague, and I believe they are deliberately being vague. So if they are so motivated to fly on a Paul's range or whatever, they can shape this and bend it to fit whatever they want it to fit. And the more I read, and it's so funny, like the people that do this kind of stuff, people that write this kind of crap, they almost always end up showing you their cards if you really scratch 100%. A little bit beneath the surface. So like everything in this bill is so vague, but then like the one thing they're super specific about is high capacity ammunition feeding device. Like, oh, why did you suddenly get so specific about that? And that goes back to a thing we talked about in the last show that you and I did about how there was this trend at SHOT Show this year of lever guns, and there's even some lever guns that now take a PMAG. And so I believe that the proliferation of lever guns is because people are trying to get around these assault weapon regulations. But any firearm with a high capacity ammunition feeding device, that would also include your lever gun that can take a PMAG. But the more I dove into this, the way my mind works, I was like, you talked about, and I didn't know about what you just said about how 3-letter agencies had actually looked into ZERT at some point. That's interesting. That's funny. But so, maybe somebody that's ill-informed or that just wants to shape it that way could call ZERT a militia. But I started thinking
yeah, but I want you to quantify that. Like, why would you put that out there like that? And again, just because
ZERT, we have T-shirts that have an insignia, that is military looking, and the people that have their first year, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year, 6th year cards, it has a little rank kind of device on it that looks military-ish. At the ZERT classes that I've trained, everybody shows up in uniform, wearing their ZERT gear. We are training with firearms. We are training with communication devices. We are wearing military gear or paramilitary gear, however you want to call it. So from a complete outsider perspective, anybody that would want to paint ZERT with that brush really wouldn't have a hard time doing it. But I looked at, if you really look at what's outlined in this bill, a lawyer that's worth 2 cents could make a case that any USPSA member is guilty under this. Because does USPSA have a rank structure? Why, yes, they do. They have a Grand Master and a D class and a B class and a C class and an A class. And this person is the president and this person is the vice president. And there's a whole clause in this bill about crossing state lines. Well, guess where USPSA matches are? They're everywhere. They're in every state. So if I cross the state line to compete in a USPSA 3-gun match, I'm training with a firearm. I've crossed state lines. I'm a member of an organization that has more than 3 people that does have a rank structure. You technically could prosecute every single USPSA member that's ever participated in a sanctioned match under this bill.
So, yeah, but so here's where I would throw a question out. I mean, and I think, Paul, when we talked yesterday, I asked you about command structure. And, I jokingly told all of the POCs, because they refer to me as the boss, and which, I don't know what you referred to XB001 as, but, there's no real command structure. I mean, and I think that's what we even talked about. Paul, when you and I talked, I said, hey, are they trying to sit there and say, because you are the instructor and they are the students, there is a command structure in place?
I think they can read it any way they want, just like we're talking about. It's, as an instructor for, phew, I just swallowed some air.
Oh boy. Okay.
I teach Maryland wear and carry, and just like Jamie said, you guys were mentioning, there is no definition for brandishing from the state of Maryland. So brandishing could be called anything. You could accidentally, pull your shirt up, and if somebody saw that firearm, and because it's not defined, they can basically go, they can arrest you. Now, is it going to go to court? Are you going to hire a lawyer? It's going to cause a lot of pain and suffering for you. And I think that's the intent of this, is just to cause a lot of, because I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, who are they going after? Like, who are they trying to charge with the crime? Because I guarantee you, it's just, and I hate to bring this up, but like everybody, there's so many people out there that hate cops until they need a cop. There's people out there. Being a ranger in Savannah, I can't tell you the amount of people that hate rangers in Savannah until 9/11 happened. And then when 9/11 happened, everybody loved rangers again because they're over, they're local here. Not everybody loved rangers, but a lot of people in Savannah loved rangers. People are hating militias right now, but Red Dawn happens and all my local buddies gather together and defend their towns. I guarantee you people are going to depend on militias, because the main reason why the Japanese didn't invade mainland America is because there's a rifle behind every blade of grass. That is a militia. Right there is all these people that are going to gather together and defend the country that they love. Unfortunately, that's what we're not right now. Just like everybody, you hate a cop until you need a cop. You hate the military until 9/11 happens and you need the military. Well, right now, it's all these organizations that they're training for all this bad stuff. Well, what if we're not? What if we just want to be prepared? And I'm not saying because I'm a member of a militia. I'm just out there training to protect my community. So they could call me a militia. Absolutely.
Well, not even so much your community, but to protect you and your family and your loved ones, your immediate,
my community.
Exactly. Right. Well, yes. I mean, and then it expands from there. I mean, the moment you put a firearm, you carry a firearm and you walk into a restaurant, you're accepting a form of responsibility that you will act as if needed. It's just kind of the best way. So, going through this bill where it starts to get so weird is, after they define everything, right? So you're right. It is really awkward that they throw ammunition in there. So, okay. So we can train without ammunition. We can do everything. What's that?
I said, that's not an accident.
Right. Exactly.
An accident in there.
Right. Explosive incendiary device, obviously firearm, and then large capacity ammunition feeding device. It's just so funny that those, like you just said, those are brought in there. They give the definition of private paramilitary organization, and then they also, like you pointed out, a regularly organized state militia. And I think that defines the National Guard. And then I think there's a couple of states that have their own, like Texas has a state guard, right?
They sure do.
Right. And then isn't there a civilian? Go ahead. Yes, Paul.
Hey, that worked. I'm going to have to do that more often. I think listening to your two different definitions of militia, the thing that I noticed from just listening to you, the definition from before, it states that the militia is fighting for this country. And then the modern day definition at the end, it says, any organization that goes up against the U.S. government. Well, there's the difference right there. Right. They're trying to they're making this assumption, and this is, and it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure this out. If they have if they see there's an intent and they get on our social media and see any posts against the government, it's like, oh, this guy's posting stuff, anti this president or anti this person, or, we need to do this or do that. now they have a reason to kind of go after you. And now if you're training, so it's one of those things that we just got to be very, very careful on, what we say and what we do. And as long as we're saying and doing everything right, if anybody's gonna go after anybody, but I'm personally not gonna sit here and live in fear when it comes to anything.
No,
now,
and
if you read this bill at the very top of this thing, when you get this thing online, and I don't know if you can see it, there's a tracker. There's a tracker on the very top of the page. It says introduced, pass Senate, pass House to president, become a law. So you can literally sit here and track every progression of this. And hopefully with common sense and the fact that we do have multiple parties, and stuff like that, this is something that should and will be shot down, and that progression. But the state of this country, you never know.
Right. And I think that's obviously, I want to make sure everybody understands that we're talking about a proposed bill. It has not gone any farther than that. And I do not think it will go any farther. It won't make it. I don't think it'll make it past the floor. But hey, stranger things have happened, right? I mean,
it's crazy that this thing was even introduced, especially coming out of this state that had so many militias to protect this country.
Okay. But that goes back to Jamie's point. Like this is a 46-year sitting government official that has done what? Probably not a lot, and we're going to get into the kind of the second half of this, which is the fact that this guy has been in government office for 46 years. That's ridiculous. We'll talk about term limits because I think this guy's act by putting this out there just shows that you need to drain the swamp, so to speak. That terminology has been thrown out there, and I think this guy somehow just circled the drain and didn't get out or get removed. But could you imagine 40 years of AOC and her
How long
stupidity?
has President Joe Biden been a politician?
Probably close to that same.
I would
that
think
same amount of time.
The same number.
But Jamie brought it up that you can't. There's term limits for presidents. You can't be a police officer for that long. There's forced retirement there. There needs to be a clear line in the sand that gets drawn, and it's stuff like this and these stupid bills that get put out there that, I mean, it should have never been introduced. It shouldn't have never, I'm sorry. If you go and you try and do a paper when you're a kid and you hand it to your parents and you write the stupidest shit ever, your parents are going to smack you, right? And you just say, no, go get back, get out of here. This guy should have been smacked at some point. When he said, here, write this up and hand it in, somebody should have been like, yeah, no, sit down, go back to just collecting your check. You're a millionaire. Shut up.
It would be interesting to see what else this guy has introduced over his 46 years of tenure. Biden was first elected to the Senate in 1972, by the way, and has been continuously serving in the government since then, and has somehow turned himself into a millionaire. But
we know that's been a while because that's the year I was born, so that has been a long time.
Right.
But
so, Paul, you can tell us exactly how long.
Every career politician all wants the same thing. It's all right. Every career politician wants to be reelected. And I think Chris, because I wasn't tracking on this, I hadn't heard of this. You pointed it out to me. And I think one of my first reactions to it was something along the lines of, this guy has to justify his existence. People like this guy have to justify their existence. They have to go to their constituency and they have to say, look what I did. Look what I tried to do. I tried to do this thing, but it got shut down by these, these right. evil other people on the other side. So I've served in the United States military for as long as I have, really and truly and honestly, because I'm a patriot and because I do believe that the United States is the greatest country in the world. And I do have faith that even though we may lose our way at times, that we are going to find our way back, and we are going to continue to be the greatest country in the world, and still holding on to a little bit of the faith that I have in our country and our government and our way of life and our Constitution that I've sworn an oath to uphold. Like Paul said, this bill is just at its introductory phase, and I really don't expect it to go anywhere. I would be extremely surprised if it even makes it, off the tee. I think that anybody with I'm not a lawyer, but I think anybody with half a brain and that went to law school for more than 5 minutes can take a look at this and
Right.
see that it's way too vague, it's way too sweeping. I do think it's, like I said before, it's not an accident that the one thing in this whole big vague bill that they're proposing, the one thing they decided to suddenly become specific about was ammunition, large capacity or high capacity ammunition feeding devices. So this is, that again, that kind of shows their cards that this is another veiled attempt at banning magazine capacity or whatever it is, and then having this whole other legal penal code that they can swipe you into. Because if you look at the part of the bill that covers how they're going to enforce it and what the penalties are going to be, if you're found guilty of any part of this bill, if it were to pass, you would the I think it's subsection 1 of the it's a forfeiture clause. It's you immediately forfeit all property that's associated with your violation of this law.
Right.
And so you would immediately you would immediately forfeit all of your firearms, all of your ammunition, because Paul owns a shooting range which was used for this unlawful training. He would immediately forfeit ownership of his actual, property and land that his shooting range is on. And I don't think this thing has a snowball's chance in hell of actually passing, but it's important that people wake up and see that this is the kind of thing that's happening probably fairly often. That's why the other reason why I would like to go back and see what other things this dude has proposed over his 46 years that never went anywhere, as an illustration that he has probably done this kind of thing his entire career, and we've never even heard about it.
Yeah. I don't know this. When did it say it was introduced on the 16th of January? So let's see, going back what Paul said here at the top. So on the 16th of January, it was the latest action. It was read twice and referred to the Committee on the Judiciary. Introduced into the Senate on the 16th of January. So here we are, almost 30 days later, and obviously it hasn't moved, which who knows what'll happen. I guess there's probably some importance here to be noted that it's an election year, and this year more than most, it's obviously important to get out there and vote because of who's on the ballot at the end of the year. I think that there's a lot of times when we sit here and we talk about the disgust of some of the things that is being proposed, but does everybody get out there and do their part? Not just every 4 years, but anytime there's an election, whether it is, and just to kind of go off the subject here, but I remember a few years back when they were trying to propose some gun control in the local town of Southbury, Connecticut, where you couldn't carry your firearm in certain buildings. And it was this huge thing. Like, you couldn't bring it in the library, you couldn't bring it in the grocery store because other people would be afraid and blah, blah. And they had such an outpouring, and it became like a town committee. They had such a huge turnout. They had to change the venue of where it was to the high school auditorium because so many people came to speak out against this proposed thing. And it got shut down. But where I was going with that is it's up to us to make sure that the people that are putting this stuff out there don't stick around. And that's, I mean, obviously it's part of our being an American is your right to vote. And if you're not out there doing it, what are you doing? Why are you complaining? Right?
Yeah,
I
when
mean,
I read this thing, it's actually funny if you read through it. There's a subparagraph here, and it says that someone cannot interfere with or intimidate another person in that
Right.
person's exercise of any right under the Constitution of the United States. Well, that right there basically to me goes against the bill. So I don't know who writes this stuff, who thinks about it. You know, but right here,
I
you're
mean,
saying
literally,
that
right.
you can't do what you're telling me that I
Yeah.
can't. You can't prosecute me
I-
for doing what you're saying that I can't do. It's crazy.
Exactly. Now, here's the thing, right? Like you would like to think the people that write this or come up with this have some sort of education and comprehension of basic skills. And I would like somebody who reads these things and understands them like I read and understand first grade kindergarten writing and Dr. Seuss to explain that part to me. It shall be unlawful to knowingly interfere with or intimidate another person in that person's exercise of any right under the Constitution of the United States. Okay.
You're trying to intimidate me right now.
Right. And
I mean,
then the best part is that two sections down, section 5 is basically they're saying any training that could be used to engage in any of these activities. So it's again, that's their little catch-all clause under that, under that. So
oh, it is just ridiculous. I mean, I would like to make this a watch party. And when it gets shut down, we just all get on and praise and have tacos and bourbon because oh my God. But what should happen is when this guy should be made to stand up in front of the class, like everybody. And we go back to a time when people's feelings weren't hurt. And when he starts to talk about this, everyone stands up and laughs at him and throws rotten fruit and calls him an idiot or uses much more offensive terminology. And he sits down and just never speaks up again.
Well, it's like
Because
you know, anytime anybody stands up and somebody asks them to find an assault rifle or define a woman, they can't do it because they don't even know what it is. So they can't define this because they have no idea. They're trying to group together. It's two groups here. If you do all this training with 3 or more people with guns and you're doing it for good, then you're okay. But if you're doing it for bad, then you're not okay. Who decides if you're doing it for good or for bad?
Right.
Whoever's in charge, you know, whoever runs the country, whichever political party. And that's the crappy thing about this is anybody can come to my house and say, you're doing this for bad. I was like, well, no, I'm not. Who are you to judge? I'm just, you know, trying to make a living, number one, and I'm not organizing anything. I'm training individuals to protect themselves.
Could you imagine if this was taking something else, like remove the firearm piece and talk about a vehicle? Like, nope. If you start training to drive better, then it's just like, you know, using a vehicle. Cars kill more people and are more dangerous. And Rick, you can be 16 and drive a vehicle. You don't even have to have a license and you can drive a vehicle and you can cause as much damage as you can.
Well, I don't think that's very far off because this country is trying to get all vehicles to run off electricity. So imagine us 3 getting together and working on gas cars. You know, holy cow, what are you doing? You're working on, you know, assault cars here. You need to be together talking about electric cars, and that might be illegal 10 years from now. And we joke about it now, but that's the direction that we're going.
That's why I pointed out that they threw in that little catch-all clause, because using your example, Chris, it's like it would be like them giving you a speeding ticket just because you drive a car that's capable of going faster than the speed limit. That's basically what.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's all pretty much summed up under the bucket of government overreach. Right? And we have just continued to see that time and time again. And it's usually always with the one amendment that says shall not be infringed. It is the most infringed upon. If you're familiar with it, I mean, Jamie, you're definitely familiar with it. California literally just had Freedom Week, where
Almost.
almost a week. It
Wasn't quite a week.
No, it was deemed unconstitutional about the ban of a California resident being able to order ammunition online and have it shipped to their house. And this has been a struggle that California residents have faced for a while. And then basically the judge over there just said, no, this is unconstitutional.
And for anybody that's not tracking, so this went into effect in 2016. You, in order to buy ammunition, not a firearm, nothing, just to buy ammunition, you had to go to an authorized FFL or an authorized dealer. That they did make an exemption for ammunition dealers that you didn't really have to be an FFL, but you basically you had to be an FFL. But right. You had to pass a background check to buy ammunition. Right. And so it had to be done in person. You had to pass a background check fee, but that also allowed them to track who is buying ammunition, what caliber, and how much and how often by passing this bill. So the Ninth Circuit Court Judge Benitez in California decided correctly that was unconstitutional because it is an infringement. And then the thing you and I talked about was California filed for a stay in the ruling, and the thing that just, as a freedom-loving American, the thing that has always driven me nuts is anytime they grant a stay in the ruling, it always defaults back to the more restrictive posture. Like, and again, I'm not a lawyer, I've never been to law school, but that has never made sense to me that when a federal district court appeals judge says that this thing is unconstitutional, to me, it should go to the lesser restrictive posture until the opposing side can prove that they're correct or whatever. I've never understood why in these cases it always defaults back to the more restrictive posture.
I mean, yeah, and that's just another example of the government overreach. And then New York State just followed suit, and so much so where that if Clark Armory attempted to ship to New York, they were threatening to sue, because in reality they really can't. I mean, listen, we won't get into what you can and can't do, and it's kind of all bullshit. But then Washington just tried to do the same thing, and it was actually shut down. The law doesn't actually state that. There are states where you have to have a permit to carry, then there's constitutional carry. The Second Amendment is obviously very clear in what it allows, and obviously these states put on their own restrictions. As you stated, this is not just in Massachusetts, but it's coming out of Massachusetts, which has some horrible restrictions. Again, you have to have a permit to buy ammo. You have a 10-round magazine limit. You need a permit to carry your firearm. I don't know if there's a waiting period to buy something, even with a permit, but it's just all disgusting overreach by the government.
And the other, I think we're getting close to wrapping up here, but the other thing I wanted to bring up and like why this is important, because I don't think this is anything that we have to be overly concerned about. Like going back to Paul's original point that he made at the top of the show, I'm not overly concerned about this. I really have faith that this isn't going to go anywhere. But this is a case for why you do need to be politically active, and I hate it when a conversation of politics comes up, inevitably there's always somebody that says, well, I hate to be political, or I hate to get political. It's like, you should want to get political. And my politics test is this: when you go to the bathroom and take a shit and you flush the toilet, do you like it when the shit disappears from your life? Yes or no?
That's a good point. That's a good.
Okay.
I like
I
that.
assume you do.
Yeah.
I assume you like it when you flush the toilet and the shit goes away. Do you know what made that happen? Politics made that happen, because in order to get your indoor plumbing and sewage lines and zoning and construction permits and all like environmental impact permits, that's all politics. If you enjoy the fact that you're able to flush your toilet and get your shit out of your life that easily, politics made that happen. So whether you think so or not, you actually are into politics if you enjoy flushing your toilet. And I heard, I listened, I'm a podcast junkie. Other than being on this one, I listen to about 5 podcasts a day. Usually I have my little set list of politics or politics. I have my set list of podcasts. And one of them talked about, it was last week. It said there's 161 million registered voters in the United States. And they said that something like 86% of those 161 million people that are registered to vote in this country, they don't decide who they're going to vote for, like in a presidential election, until 1 month or less before the election. And they said that they estimate that people that maintain a politically active status, meaning you're actively following politics and actively following what happened in the Democratic Party and what happened in the Republican Party today, and what did Joe Biden say in this speech, and what is this bill that's being proposed by Congress, that people that actually track that and follow that, and they listen to politics and pay attention to politics on a daily basis, is less than 1% of those 161 million registered voters in this country. So if nothing else from this bill, this should be a wake-up call that you need to wake up and you need to get politically active, and you don't need to be ashamed of being into politics.
That is a hard lift for me. And it's because stupidity hurts. Like, stupidity hurts my brain, and just seeing some of the, there's a video that just came up, and they were, and it was the president of the United States talking, and I'm sitting here looking at this guy going, holy shit, what is this guy rambling about? Like, mumbling, rambling, looking incoherent, looking confused, looking like he's just waiting for his tapioca pudding to be served to him so he can put slippers on and watch, like, reruns of Dragnet. Like, what is happening here? And it's just hard for me, because I'm like, my God, this is what other countries look at us. You referred to this being the greatest country on earth, and shit, man, like, we're being laughed at.
Yeah, for sure.
And here, I'm gonna throw this out there. I'm not saying that the other guy is the best thing that we have to offer as well. I mean, is there nothing better? Has our government and politics become so shitty that people just, like, good people don't want to do it? Like, they just don't. They're like, no, screw that. Who the hell wants to step in to the president role and then just be scrutinized for the next 4 years of their life because they wore brown shoes instead of blue shoes? They used chocolate ice cream instead of vanilla ice cream. Because that's all it is. It doesn't matter. If you say up, everyone's like, well, he didn't say down. Okay. Like,
yeah, I think we've all seen that analogy with the 4 phases of, the country. And I think we're at that one spot where it says weak men create weak times. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But the thing that scares me the most is there's politicians that actually believe this crap, this bill,
right.
Yeah. And I don't know if they're so narrow-minded, but somebody had to write this. And there are people out there that agree. They read this and they agree with it. It's like, do you really understand what you're agreeing with here? And that's the thing that, whether this thing passes or not. And I agree with you guys. I don't think it's going to reach the next step. But there are actually people out there that believe that this should be an effect. This should be a bill. And that's what I'm just like, what are you thinking? It amazes me that part of the country feels like that.
And I'm hoping it was done by an intern, and that intern's fired. But geez, it's scary.
Well, that really puts me at a loss because I don't believe they actually believe it. If you actually hook them up to a polygraph test that was connected to a taser that was connected to their genitals, I don't believe they believe this crap. Like,
well, let me hold on. Let me ask: what, all or some? Because I believe in some. You can take the asshole from this state, from Connecticut, and he 100% probably believes this, and he probably uses it as lotion.
Well, the guy that wrote this bill is going to tell you that he believes in it. Meanwhile, he's being protected by people who have taken classes exactly like the classes that Paul and I teach, which shows you that he doesn't actually believe it.
Well, I mean, so I guess then you can take
because
that.
If he actually believed it, then he wants to take away the guns and the training from the guy that's protecting him.
Well, no,
which he doesn't want to do.
That's not necessarily true, because in it, he says there are exceptions to that. And the exceptions are the people that they deem worthy. So,
well, okay, well, if you want your personal protection detail to be, a 270-pound guy from the Texas State Guard, I guess knock yourself out. But
no, you're not getting an argument for me, but they're saying that, well, police officers are necessary so they can do this, and Secret Service are necessary because they're, they've been vetted and whatnot, so they're allowed to do this, but you can't. I mean, who knows? You might be able to, because you are current active duty military. Paul, you were good until you decided, right?
Yeah, I'm not good anymore. There's so many people out there that think, it's like, I don't want you to carry a gun, but I can carry a gun because I'm above you.
That's exactly my point. Which shows that they don't actually believe this. And they'll tell you they do, but they actually don't.
Yeah.
Because deep down somewhere inside of them, they know that a person with a gun, with training, that they actually do need that person. But exactly like Paul just said, I'm okay with my guy having a gun. I just don't want you and you to have one.
Right. Guys, as we close out the episode, we always like to kind of interject some point here. And I think that the takeaway for me and hopefully for you guys out there is that 100% you should be getting involved to a certain extent when it comes to voting and making sure that we get the right person in office that is going to continue to protect our rights and not try and take them away. We will keep an eye on this. Obviously we're going to be tracking on it and continuing to watch and see if it gets anywhere. ZERT training is still happening. We still have a curriculum to put out there and to teach, and we're going to continue to do so. And that's just the bottom line. So, as always, you guys stay safe out there and make sure that you are getting involved as you can. Jamie?
Get involved, be politically involved, don't be shy about that, and get training. Even though this bill tells you not to, the fact that this bill tells you not to is exactly the reason why you need to. So get training, and remember that it's easy to be hard and it's hard to be smart.
Paul?
Yeah, we know our rights. So I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to say don't be scared, but know your rights and go out there and train every day. Try to be better.
Awesome. Okay, guys, we'll talk to you guys real soon. Stay safe. ZP002 out.